Disclaimer. This is the same as when we covered Prince Philip. We know that there are certain things and beliefs that today's subject did and had that would be morally questionable at best, offensive at worst today. We'll leave the personal opinions to you, the listener. It's our job to give you the facts, so we will, without imposing our own cultural script on it.
Today, on a nice cup of history tea, we want you to leave today and enter the world of yesterday, tomorrow and fantasy, where we believe in our idea, a family park where parents and children can have fun together. Yes, dear listener, we are finally dedicating an episode to the myth, the legend, the almighty Walt Disney.
And on this week's ridiculous death, we discuss why it isn't always best to act out when you're frustrated.
So, grab your Mickey ears, your Mickey waffle, and anything Disney related. And let's get historical. So, here's Walt Disney's early life. It was 120 years ago, this very day, in Chicago, Illinois, that Walter Elias Disney was born. Now that's the 5th of December 1901, for those not so quick at maths.
Happy birthday to Walt. Happy birthday to Walt. Happy birthday, Mr. Disney. Happy birthday to Walt.
That was completely unscripted. I loved that. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
So, his father Elias, cool name, was Irish-Canadian, and his mother, Flora Cal, was German-English. Walter was the fourth of 5 children born to the couple, 4 boys and 1 girl. She did her job well.
She did. She created heirs, spare.
Yep, and a girl. He had 3 older brothers, Herbert, Raymond and Roy, and a younger sister, Ruth.
His father was a very strict religious man who was often physically abusive towards his children, and we will get into that in more depth later.
That took a turn.
Yeah.
When Walter was born, his father was working as a building contractor. However, soon after, Elias was offered the chance to take over a farm in Marceline, Missouri, which he did, uprooting the family to do so.
Whilst here, he was once paid to draw the horse of a retired local doctor. So that's Walt. He was paid to draw the horse for a retired local doctor, which this got him interested in drawing. He would practice drawing cartoons from the front page of the newspaper that his father subscribed to. He also began to gain skill with watercolours and crayons. So from a very early age, from about 10 years old, he was really into drawing, colouring, painting.
He had that artistic
creativeness.
Elias, however, did not approve of Walt's interest in drawing, believing instead that he should spend his time engaged in hard manual labour. However, in one of the few times his mother was able to successfully intervene for him with Elias, she convinced her husband to buy Walt a set of coloured pencils and some drawing paper. Walt was thrilled and spent every spare moment he had honing his drawing skill and enjoying his hobby.
Despite Walt's later remarkable huge success as an animator, which you've got to admit, Walt Disney is kind of successful.
A little bit.
His father never considered it a real job or approved of it at all. Not gonna lie, that kind of makes me feel a little bit better about my life. That even when he was, Walt Disney, his dad still didn't think that he was enough. Yes. It wasn't enough.
So, they meet up again on the other side, and, Walt's like, oh, I've done all this, and we've got all this massive animation empire, and people dream about this, and it's creating billions around the world, and his dad's just standing there like, you could have done better.
Right?
Yeah, it's just like, okay, cool. Parents.
Man. Anyway.
We digress.
We do.
Walter was very happy on the farm, but he was very lonely. His oldest brothers, Herbert and Raymond, left home as soon as they were able, and Roy was 8 years old, so little Walt spent a lot of his childhood alone.
Yeah, and to make up for this loneliness, Walt made friends out of the farm animals. He
anthropomorphized. So that basically means that he made them human, sort of. He gave them human characteristics.
He anthropomorphized the animals into his personal companions, particularly the pigs. In fact, he once said that his best friend as a child was a pig on the farm which he named Porker the pig. He loved Porker so much that he would sometimes get on her back and ride her, and she let him. So can you imagine, like a little 10-year-old Walt Disney riding the back of this pig?
One boy and his pig.
right? Walt, when he was older, once said of Porker, this is his words, "I guess I really loved that pig. She had an acute sense of fun and mischief. Do you remember the foolish pig and the little pigs?" Porker was the model for him.
Unfortunately, in 1911, the farm failed. So Elias moved the family once again to Kansas City, Missouri, when Walt was 10. Here he attended the Benton Grammar School, where he met and befriended a fellow student, also named Walter Pfeiffer.
Just quick, because I forgot to write it in here. The reason the farm failed was because Elias was naive, and he believed that everyone was as trusting as he was.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I'm not taking no shit, a dead straight guy. And he thought everyone was the same. So someone told him that pesticides wasn't good enough, so he did nothing on the farm. He planted the crops and then left them. And that is why it then failed.
You do need to give a little bit of attention to your farm there, Elias.
No, he planted the crops and then went home. Went back in. Was like, that'll be fine. Hasn't rained in a few days. Yeah, be fine.
Wow. Just wow.
Yep. Anyway, Walter Pfeiffer's family were fans of the theatre and introduced young Walt Disney to vaudeville and the movies. Walt loved these things so much that he would eventually spend more time at the Pfeiffer home than in his own, because his father didn't approve of such things as theatre and movies and blah blah blah.
His father didn't approve of much.
No, he did not.
As we stated before, Elias was a harsh man with a strict moral code, and he didn't allow any playtime, games or toys for his children, and lots of hard work at young ages.
When the Disneys were living in Kansas City, his father purchased a newspaper route and made Walt and his older brother Roy work it. Elias would wake both of his sons up at 3:30 a.m. every day before school so they could deliver the newspaper, and they then had to do it again for the evening edition when they got home.
Oh, bless them.
Mm-hmm.
And between that and doing their schoolwork, Walt and Roy were exhausted for much of their adolescent years. Elias didn't even let them keep the money they earned from the route because he believed they were too young to know the value of money.
So he got them up at 3:30 every morning to do 2 paper routes in a day and gave them no money for it.
Basically, he just gave them exhaustion and a life lesson.
But Walter did have a fun uncle, Mike Martin. He was a train engineer who worked the route between Fort Mason in Iowa and Merceline, where, importantly, Walt developed his love for trains. This becomes very apparent later on in his life, his love for trains. And this is where it developed from his uncle. But also, he secretly worked on the trains, selling candies and sweets and newspapers on a specific train that travelled between Kansas City and Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
So his father didn't know, and he kept that money. It was a secret.
The secret keeping was apparently a family trait. When he was a boy, Elias loved to play the fiddle, but his own parents didn't approve of it. So Elias would go to the woods alone to practice, and when he was good enough at it, he snuck into the local dance hall so he could play the fiddle with other musicians. He did this for a while before his parents found out about it, but they eventually did. When Elias's parents found out what he was doing, they came to the dance hall, where his mother grabbed his fiddle and smashed it, then dragged him out of the hall by his ear. According to Roy Disney, his grandparents believed playing the fiddle and dancing were evil and didn't want Elias to have any part of it.
So you can kind of see that Elias was a harsh father, but he came from harsh parenting.
Yeah.
So it was like a family thing. Ironically, however, Elias wanted Walt to learn to play the fiddle, so he would always have a means of earning money to fall back on. He forced Walt to practice, and Walt had a hard time keeping his elbow in the right position for playing. And Walt recalled that Elias would slap him every time his elbow moved out of position. But despite this harsh teaching, Walt never became proficient at the fiddle as Elias wanted him to be.
Well, sometimes if you're harsh, you're not going to make that person good at it just because you're harsh. If anything, they'll secretly rebel against it.
Yeah.
As stated before, Elias was abusive towards his children, and he would beat Roy and Walt almost every day for the slightest offence. However, his extreme religious conservative attitude and refusal to show any emotion, love or affection to his family was common for the Kansas City area during the time the Disney family lived there. Again, not saying at all that this was an okay thing, but it just wasn't uncommon back in the early 1900s.
Kansas City had a recreation superintendent in those days, a man called Fred McClure, as well as a Board of Public Welfare investigator named Fred R. Johnson. Now, these two men regulated all forms of amusement and fun in Kansas City, with an aim to keep all of the city's citizens on the straight and narrow. Their regime was a hugely repressive one, so it wasn't just the Disney family, it was Kansas City as a whole. It was citywide, that you weren't supposed to have fun or any amusement in your life.
Only their kind of fun, their kind of amusement. So it was fun on their terms.
Yeah.
When Walt was 16, Elias moved the family back to Chicago as he purchased stock in the Ozell company there and took a job in the management of the company, which was headquartered there.
Here, Disney attended McKinley High School. I got very excited because I was like, oh, Glee, is that a reference? I forgot to check. Anyway, I digress.
One job.
So Disney attended the McKinley High School, where he took drawing and photography classes and was a contributing cartoonist for the school paper. And at night, he actually took courses at the Art of Institute in Chicago.
Looking to get away from his father, Walt tried to join the war in 1918, but the army rejected him because he was still under 18. He tried again, forging his birthday on his birth certificate, which a lot of boys did during World War One. The youngest soldier who fought in the war was just 12 years old.
Yeah, it's been reported that there were 12 in World War One.
I've actually been to the grave of the youngest person to die in World War One, and it's just outside Ypres.
I've been there.
Yeah, you can see they've had to redo the groundwork on it and everything because people trade it down. There's all little teddy bears and everything there. It's really sad.
Yep. So, with this forged document in hand, Walt was able to join the Red Cross as an ambulance driver and was sent to France. However, he arrived there after the armistice, so didn't get to do very much. Instead, he spent his short time in France drawing cartoons on the side of the ambulance, and some of his work was published in the Stars and Stripes, which was the Army's official newspaper.
So basically, he forged his signature, he forged his age, forged his signature, and went all the way over there just to graffiti an ambulance.
Pretty much.
Cool.
But he's still drawing. It's a massive thing in his life.
So that was his early life.
Harsh. It was quite
a harsh upbringing, and he obviously had a lot of demons to work through.
Yeah, he was lonely, he was beaten, he was downtrodden, he was
religiously and socially oppressed.
Yeah. So you got a feel for him at this point.
And some of his later attitudes would be a product of that upbringing.
Yeah, as well as obviously the time in which the early 1900s and up until.
So Walt returned to Kansas City in 1919 to work as a commercial illustrator and later made crude animated cartoons. And it was around this time Disney began experimenting with the camera, doing hand-drawn cell animation. He decided to open his own animation business, from the ad company, he recruited Fred Harmon as his first employee.
Disney and Harmon made a deal with a local Kansas City theatre to screen their cartoons, which they called Laughograms. I like that. The cartoons were hugely popular, and Disney was able to acquire his own studio, which he also called Laughogram.
Laughogram hired a number of employees, including Up Iwerks, remember that name, and Harmon's brother Hugh. They did a series of 7-minute fairy tales that combined both live action and animation, which they called Alice in Cartoonland. However, by 1923, the studio had become burdened with debt, and Disney was forced to declare bankruptcy.
So to add to his childhood, he had a bit of success and then had to declare himself bankrupt.
Which I think at that point his father would have been like, I told you so.
This did not deter them, however. So Disney and his brother Roy moved to Hollywood with cartoonist Up Iwerks. So the three of them went, and they began the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. The company soon changed its name to Walt Disney Studios at Roy's suggestion. So his older brother told him to call it Walt Disney Studios.
And there we have the
Walt
beginning
Disney
of it.
Studios, yep.
The Walt Disney Studios' first deal was with New York distributor Margaret Winkler to distribute their Alice cartoons. They also invented a character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and contracted the shorts at $1,500 each.
Which back in 1923,
that's a lot.
That's some dollar.
Yeah.
But because of his strict upbringing, as you've probably noticed, girls were not a consideration for Walt. Not until he was grown. In fact, he was kept so busy working for Elias, as well as conducting his own personal activities of both economic and educational natures, that girls were of no interest to him whatsoever for quite a long time. He later said that when he was young, girls were no more than a nuisance to him. Cheers.
Thanks, Walt.
Yep. And as a grown man, he once commented in Times magazine in 1954 that, and I quote, "I was normal, but girls bored me. They still do. Their interests are just different."
I mean, yes, their interests are different. Some might not be different, though. But product of his upbringing.
Yeah.
It was at the Walt Disney Studios that a young girl named Lillian Bounds began working in ink and paint as a secretary for Disney, and he became enthralled with her. And although he vowed he would not marry before he was at least 25 years old, with $10,000 saved, he couldn't resist. So a girl got him in the end.
Oh, it's a love story.
On the 13th of July, my brother's birthday, on the 13th of July 1925, the two married at Lillian's brother's home in Lewiston, Idaho. The wedding was officiated by the rector of Lewiston's Episcopal Church of the Nativity.
That's a mouthful, isn't it?
Put your teeth back in, Carrie. Shockingly, not. Walt's parents did not attend. Let me guess, his father didn't approve.
Probably not. And as Lillian's father had passed away, her uncle, who was chief of the Lewiston Fire Department, gave the bride away. She wore a dress that she made herself. The couple had two daughters, Diane Marie Disney, she was born in 1933, and Sharon May Disney, who was born in 1936, the latter of whom was adopted.
Oh.
Yeah, and the Disneys didn't make any. Everyone knew she was adopted, and they weren't shy about it, but they didn't like it if anyone out of their immediate family mentioned it in like a negative connotation sort of thing.
Yeah.
She was their daughter. And from this, Walt and Lillian had 10 grandchildren, 7 by Diane and her husband, Ron W. Miller, who was actually was a CEO of Disney World. I don't know the exact dates, but he was. And 3 by Sharon and her two husbands, Robert and William.
Okay.
So he was a granddaddy of 7.
Oh. By 1926, film producer Charles Mintz joined the company, although the relationship between him and Disney was sometimes strained. The Alice series ran until July 1927, by which time Disney had begun to tire of it and wanted to move away from the mixed format to all animation. After Mintz requested new material to distribute through Universal Pictures, Disney and iWorks created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, a character Disney wanted to be peppy, alert, saucy and venturesome, keeping him also neat and trim.
In February of 1928, Disney hoped to negotiate a larger fee for producing the Oswald series, but found that Mintz wanting to reduce the payments. Mintz had also persuaded many of the artists involved to leave Disney and work directly for him, including Harmon, Ising, Carmen Maxwell and Fritz Freeling.
Disney also found out that Universal owned the intellectual property rights to Oswald. Mintz threatened to start his own studio and produce the series himself if Disney refused to accept the reductions.
Mintz actually had a final deal that was dealt to Walt and Roy, and that was for them to become his employees. Disney declined this, and it resulted in his contract for the Oswald series to not be renewed. Disney, iWorks, and a few non-defecting animators secretly began to work on a certain new mouse character during the production of the last contracted Oswald cartoons.
Now, we aren't going to go into great detail about the most famous mouse in the world, as we have already released an episode based solely on Mickey called A Star Is Drawn.
Yeah, give that a listen. That was one of our very first episodes.
Yeah.
It was like in the first 10, definitely.
Yeah, I think it was pretty early on.
Yeah, so we've done that, so go and have a listen. But we shall give you the basics. So he was originally called Mortimer Mouse until Walt's wife Lillian suggested that Mickey would be a better fit. Think she may have been onto something.
A little bit, yeah. I don't think, Mortimer Mouse Funhouse would quite work.
No, and you can't... I was gonna, in my head, I was like, yes, Emily, you can sing the Mickey Mouse song with the Mortimer lyric, words, but I was like, no, I can't remember. So instead of M-I-C-K-E-Y, it'd be M-O-R-T-I-M-E-R-M-O-U-S-E. Too much of a mouthful.
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
No.
Disney created a Mickey cartoon with a sound called Steamboat Willie. A businessman named Pat Powers provided Disney with both distribution and the Cinephone, a bootlegged sound synchronization process. Steamboat Willie became a success, and Plain Crazy, The Galloping Gaucho, and all future Mickey cartoons were released with soundtracks. Disney himself provided the vocal effects for the earliest cartoons and performed as the voice of Mickey Mouse until 1947 and replaced by sound effects guy Jimmy McDonald.
So yeah, the earliest Mickey Mouse cartoons of Walt's voice. I love that.
I didn't know.
I love that because it's like his baby and he voiced it. It was him. Joining the Mickey Mouse series in 1929 were a series of musical shorts called The Silly Symphonies, which began with the skeleton dance. You know the infamous dance where there's spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down my spine. It's that, and it's the whole cartoon with that song, and it's really cool. You should watch it. It's on Disney Plus. But yeah, so that was one of the things that came out using the same process as the Mickey Mouse cartoons.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. Although both series were successful, the Disney studio was not seeing its rightful share of profits from Powers. And in 1930, Disney signed a new distribution deal with Sony/Columbia Pictures, leaving behind Powers and Ub Iwerks, who had been lured into an exclusive contract with Powers.
So they've been together for like over 10 years at this point.
But Ub Iwerks decides to leave him.
Yep.
After heading the only mildly successful Ub Iwerks studio, Iwerks would return to Disney in 1940 and, in the studio's research and development department, pioneer a number of film processes and specialised animation technologies.
So he tried 10 years on his own and Disney still had him back.
Yeah, that's
nice.
friendship.
In it though. In 1932, the film entitled Flowers and Trees would win Walt the first of his 32 personal Academy Awards.
Trademark.
Yeah. In 1937, he released The Old Mill, the first short subject to utilise the multiplane camera technique. So he is progressing animation.
Yeah.
In the 30s.
Yeah, he's steamrolling it.
Yeah, steamroll. Quite excited. Sorry. It's Disney, I'm going to get excited.
The same year, Disney received a special Academy Award for the creation of Mickey Mouse, whose series was moved into colour in 1935 and soon launched spin-off series for supporting characters such as Donald Duck, Goofy and Pluto. Sorry, I took a drink of my Bucks Fizz. Rude.
Apologies. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, you've probably heard of that.
Possibly.
This was the first full-length animated musical feature ever and was in full production from 1935 until mid-1937, when the studio ran out of money. To acquire funding for to complete Snow White, Disney had to show a rough cut of the motion picture to loan officers at the Bank of America. They loved it so much they gave him the money to finish the picture.
That was the right choice.
Yeah, so he also had to have a lot of gumption and confidence to go to the Bank of America and be like, look at this crap rough copy, I'll make it good.
Yeah, but then they must have seen something in that copy and thought, you know what, go for it.
Yep.
The finished film premiered at the Carthay Circle Theatre on December 21st, 1937. At the conclusion of the film, the audience gave Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs a standing ovation.
And if I remember correctly, I believe it was 11 minutes. Sorry.
Nice.
11 minutes standing ovation.
That's impressive.
Mm-hmm. The movie was produced at an unheard of cost of $1,499,000 they were in the depth of the Great Depression in America at this time. The film is still accounted as one of the great feats and imperishable moments of motion picture industry.
Yeah, that was the moment where it was like, look at what animation films can do.
Yeah.
Look at what they can be.
And it's like, just think, America is in the depths of the Greatest Depression and Walt Disney still makes a film for $1.5 million.
Yeah, it's insane.
In it.
Pinocchio and Fantasia followed Snow White into movie theatres in 1940, but both were financial disappointments. The inexpensive Dumbo was planned as an income generator, but during the production of the new film, most of the animation staff went on strike, permanently straining the relationship between Disney and his artists.
Yeah, because Disney always he didn't see his employees, they were family.
Yeah. And then
so he would have took that quite personal.
Yeah.
But shortly after Dumbo was released in October 1941, it did become a successful moneymaker. However, 1941.
Yeah.
the United States entered World War II, and the US Army took over most of the Disney Studios facilities and had the staff create training and instructional videos and films for the military, as well as some home front propaganda such as Der Fuhrer's Face, which, if you've seen it, it is a short with Donald Duck being a Nazi. And yeah, it's
Donald. Really?
Yeah, it's not great now, but obviously in World War II, you're hating Hitler and his regime.
And what better way to do that than to make someone a laughing stock?
Yeah, and that's what he did. I'll show it to you because you can still find it on YouTube.
Okay.
Pretty sure it's not on Disney Plus. You can find it.
Even with Stars Play, that would not. No.
Yeah, I think Donald Duck might be playing Hitler. Don't quote me on that. I think he might be.
We shall find out.
It's yeah, but yeah. So he made that, and it was the feature film he made called Victory Through Air Power in 1943. The military films did not generate income, however, and Bambi underperformed when it was released in April of 1942. Disney successfully, though, reissued Snow White in 1944, thus establishing the 7-year re-release tradition for Disney features. You probably don't realise, but every 7 years, Disney re-release the movie they made with a special effect or special edition or something like this.
I did not realise that, but now I'm going to look back and notice a pattern.
Every 7 years. Because at this point, they were like, shit, we're losing money. What made money? Snow White. Let's re-release it with like 10 seconds of something extra.
Yeah.
And people went mental over it.
In 1947, during the dark early years of the Cold War, Walt Disney testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee, and he named several of his employees as communist sympathisers. Not great, as you say. He saw them as family, so this is a bit. Yeah, it's a bit of a. Some historians believe that the animosity from the 1941 strike of Disney Studio employees caused him to bear a grudge. Entirely possible. His dislike and distrust of labour unions may have also led to his testimony.
Yeah, so not great, but times and
and it was a tit for tat sort of thing. By the sounds of it.
And the Cold War wasn't great for America.
There was a lot of fear, a lot of mass hysteria.
Yeah.
A lot of confusion and a lot of neighbour against neighbour.
Yeah. Back
then, and it wasn't helped by some of the government officials at the time.
No.
However, as you say, objective.
Yep. So, in early 1950, Disney produced Cinderella, the studio's first animated feature in 8 years. This, not surprisingly, was popular with critics and theatre audiences. Disney was less involved than he had been with previous movies because of his involvement in his first entirely live-action feature, which was Treasure Island in 1950. This was shot in Britain, as was the story of Robin Hood and his merry men in 1952. Other all-live-action features followed, many of which had patriotic themes.
Which I suppose they kind of needed at the time with the Cold War and everything going on. They needed that bit of patriotism.
He was an American man.
He continued to produce full-length animated features too, including Alice in Wonderland in 1951 and Peter Pan in 1953. From the early to mid-1950s, Disney began to devote less attention to the animation department, entrusting most of its operations to his key animators, the 9 Old Men, although he was always present at story meetings. Instead, he started concentrating on other ventures. What could those be?
Well, in 1949, Disney had now got enough money, he was comfortable, he was quite successful, that he moved his family to a new home on a large piece of property in the Holmby Hills district of LA in California. And with the help of his friends, Ward and Betty Kimball, they owned their own backyard railroad. And do you remember me saying that Walt Disney developed at the beginning a massive interest in trains?
Yeah.
For how they worked, for they could take you to different places, and as a kid hating his home life, that was like a dream, being able to get on a train and leave.
I may get the name wrong, but isn't there the train in Dumbo, Casey Jr.? Isn't that pretty much a character in its own right?
Yeah. With his friends, because he's seen that they had their own backyard railroad, Disney developed the blueprint and immediately set to work creating his own miniature railroad in his backyard. The name of this railroad was Carrollwood Pacific Railroad, which was originated from the address of his home, which was located on Carrollwood Drive.
Okay.
The railroad was half a mile long. It was laid out, which included a 46-foot-long trestle, loops, overpasses, gradients, an elevated dirt beam, and a 90-foot tunnel underneath Mrs. Disney's flower bed.
But she wasn't that happy about that.
Well, it was underneath and she didn't see, but that's a pretty epic
That is
train track to have in your back garden. He even named the miniature working steam locomotive built by Roger E. Broggie of the Disney Studios Lily Bell in his wife's honour. So he named his train. He asked his friend at the Disney Studios, "Name me a train," and he named it after his wife, which is cute.
I wonder if he named it after his wife after she'd seen what he did to the flower beds.
Can you imagine that? Sorry, love, digging up your flower beds, building a tunnel for a train.
But I named it after you. Oh, well,
you man.
Disney used to take his daughters to the local park where they would ride a carousel. They loved it, but they wished it was something their father could enjoy with them, and Walt agreed. He realised there wasn't really anywhere that children and parents could play together without it being a little weird.
Yep, this gave Disney an idea. On a business trip to Chicago, he drew sketches of his ideas for an amusement park where he envisaged his employees spending time with their children. These ideas developed into a concept for a larger enterprise which was to become Disneyland. Disney spent 5 years of his life developing Disneyland and created a new subsidiary of his company called WED Enterprises for Walter Elias Disney.
Okay.
This was to carry out the planning and production of the park. A small group of Disney Studio employees joined the Disneyland development project as engineers and planners, and they were dubbed Imagineers. Now, Imagineers are still here today. It's actually called WED Enterprises, has now been changed to Walt Disney's Imagineering. That's the name of the company now. Because people who worked, the reason he made it a second company, because people who were working on the Disney movies, he couldn't find people to take them out to put them onto the Disney Park project. Yeah. So he created a separate company. One worked on the movies, one worked on the theme parks.
So now you've still got Walt Disney Studios.
Yeah,
and you've got the Imagineers.
Walt Disney Imagineers. I would sell my soul to be an Imagineer. Honestly. You need to watch the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. I watched it, I cried every episode.
I've seen it with you.
If you can't tell, I'm a bit of a Disney nerd.
Yeah, I've seen it with you, and every single episode, all I could hear was, "I'd love to do this.
I would sell my soul to be an Imagineer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I get emotional thinking about what imagine making roller coasters. Oh, sorry, I digress. Go on.
So, when he was presenting his plan to the Imagineers, Disney said, "I want Disneyland to be the most amazing place on earth, and I want a train circling it." For several years, Disney had been considering building a theme park. When he visited Griffith Park in Los Angeles with his daughters, he wanted to be in a clean, unspoiled park where both children and their parents could have fun. He visited the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, Denmark, and was heavily influenced by the cleanliness and layout of the park. In March 1952, he received zoning permission to build a theme park in Burbank near the Disney Studios. This site proved too small, and a larger plot in Anaheim, 35 miles or 56 kilometres south of the studio, was purchased.
Disneyland was finally opened on July 17th, 1955, and was immediately successful. Visitors from around the world came to visit Disneyland, which contained attractions based upon a number of successful Disney properties and films. The castle in Disneyland is based on Sleeping Beauty's castle, because it was released 2 years after Disneyland opened, so they kind of wanted to get people excited for Sleeping Beauty, the movie that was coming out. So he based his first theme park castle on Sleeping Beauty.
That's cool.
Yes.
The Walt Disney Studio was one of the first to take full advantage of the then new medium of television, producing its first TV special, 1 Hour in Wonderland, on Christmas Day in 1950. Walt Disney began hosting a weekly anthology series on ABC named Disneyland after the park, where he showed clips of past Disney productions, gave tours of his studio, and familiarised the public with Disneyland as it was being constructed in Anaheim, California. In 1955, he debuted the studio's first daily television show, the popular Mickey Mouse Club, which would continue in many various incarnations into the 1990s.
Yep, and some famous people that were Mickey Mouseketeers. Britney
Yep.
Spears, Justin Timberlake,
Christina Aguilera.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Yeah.
I'd love to watch those Walt Disney shows. They, like you said earlier, they should be put on Disney Plus.
Yeah, they should be.
Yeah. After 1955, the Disneyland TV show became known as Walt Disney Presents, and it went from black and white to colour in 1961, changing its name then to Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Colour, and eventually evolved into what it is known today as The Wonderful World of Disney, which continues to air on ABC as of 2005.
That's cool.
And in Anaheim, there is actually a water show called The Wonderful World of Colour.
That's cool.
And
That's
it
nice
uses the song from the show, The Wonderful World of Colour. That's what you're getting.
It's beautiful. It's like I was there.
Honestly, I'm trying to hone my nerdiness down.
Don't, let it show. You're
Let
passionate
it
about something.
show. Oh my god.
Maybe not that much. During the mid-1950s, Disney produced a number of educational films on the space program in collaboration with NASA rocket designer Werner von Braun. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Man in Space and Man on the Moon. No, Man in Space and Man and the Moon in 1955, and Mars and Beyond in 1957. So my brain just saw the and thought it was wrong, but no. My bad. The films attracted the attention of not only the general public, but also the Soviet space program.
Yeah, because obviously at this time in the 1960s, there was a race.
Space race!
It was going to be, is it USA going to be first, or was it Russia? USA, Russia.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
It was USA.
By the early 1960s, the Disney Empire was a major success, to say the least. And Walt Disney Productions had established itself as the world's leading producer of family entertainment. After decades of trying, Disney finally procured the rights to P.L. Travis's book about a magical nanny.
Which we've also covered in Just Popping Along on Our Travers.
Yep, that was only a couple of episodes ago.
It was indeed.
This was obviously Mary Poppins, released in 1964, and was the most successful Disney film of the 1960s, and many held the live-action / animation combination feature as his greatest achievement.
The same year, Disney debuted a number of exhibits at the 1964 New York World's Fair, including audio animatronic figures, all of which later were integrated into attractions at Disneyland, and a new theme park project to be established on the East Coast, which Disney had been planning since Disneyland opened. So literally, as soon as he's got the one thing started, he's on to the next.
It almost feels like he didn't rest.
He's like a train. Basically, he is like a train. He's got that frenetic, constant forward energy.
In the same year, in 1964, Walt Disney Productions began quietly purchasing land in central Florida, west of Orlando, in a largely rural area of marginal orange groves for Disney's Florida project. It's really hard to think now of that part of Orlando being rural and not having anything there now.
I have not been, so I can't picture it, but I can get why it would be.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all you've always known.
Yeah. The company acquired over 27,000 acres, or 109 square kilometres of land, and arranged favourable state legislation which would provide unprecedented governmental control over the area to be developed in 1966, founding the Reedy Creek Improvement District.
Okay.
So he managed to buy this land. He got an unprecedented, basically, it's its own government.
Mm-hmm.
He decides it. He also bought the airspace around it, so no airplanes can fly at a certain height over Disney World. So he did this.
Spoilers for what it is.
Sorry. Disney and his brother Roy then announced plans for what would be called Disney World. Disney World was to include a larger, more elaborate version of Disneyland to be called the Magic Kingdom, and would also feature a number of golf courses and resort hotels. The heart of Disney World, however, was to be the experimental prototype city or community of tomorrow, or Epcot for short. Epcot was designed to be an actual operational city where residents would live, work and interact using advanced and experimental technology, while scientists would develop and test new technologies to improve human life and health.
So he's putting his passion for science and for technology not just into animation and entertainment, but also into everyday life.
Yeah, he wanted to literally build a city in the centre of Disney World.
Okay. Disney said of Epcot, "I don't believe there is a challenge anywhere in the world that is more important to people everywhere than finding the solution to the problems of our cities. But where do we begin? Well, we're convinced we must start with the public need. And the need is not just for curing the old ills of old cities. We think the need is for starting from scratch on virgin land and building a community that will become a prototype for the future."
So he wanted to build a city and be like, look how this city is functioning with all these new technologies. Let's put it into actual other cities. Thus, Disney directed the purchase of 43 square miles of virgin land, which was twice the size of Manhattan Island.
That's big.
That is big. And this would be in the centre of the state of Florida. Here he master planned a whole new Disney World of entertainment to include a new amusement theme park, a motel, hotel, resort, vacation centre, and his Epcot, which is the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. After more than 7 years of master planning and preparation, including 52 months of actual construction, Walt Disney World opened to the public as scheduled on October the 1st, 1971. It's just had its 50th anniversary and celebrations are ongoing. Epcot Centre was opened on October 1st, 1982. So 11 years after Walt Disney World opened, Epcot opened.
Well, if it's going to be like a technological prototype, then it's going to need a little bit extra.
So as you see, that Epcot was Disney's new baby.
Yeah.
And it opened in 1971, which means Disney never saw it.
Prior to his death, on December the 15th, 1966, Walt Disney took a deep interest in the establishment of California Institute of the Arts, a college-level professional school of all the creative and performing arts. Of Cal Arts, Walt once said, "It's the principal thing I hope to leave when I move on to greener pastures. If I can help provide a place to develop the talent of the future, I think I will have accomplished something." So he wanted to give students the chance that he never got.
So, however, Disney's involvement in Walt Disney World ended in late 1966 when he was diagnosed with lung cancer in his left lung after a lifelong habit of chain smoking, where his dreams of advancements in the improvement of human health would have come in handy.
Yeah.
But he had been smoking since World War One, but he didn't smoke cigarettes with a filter. He smoked a pipe since he was young.
He was checked into the St. Joseph's Hospital across the street from the Disney studio lot, and his health eventually deteriorated. His dedication to his projects was still visible whilst lying on his deathbed. On the evening of December the 14th, Roy came to visit him. Here, Walt pointed up to the ceiling using the tiles as a grip map. He then signalled Roy about the roads and major places in Epcot and Disney World. Even sick and near death, Walt's mind was clear, active and vibrant. His imagination fully engaged and his voice enthusiastic.
It came as a complete shock to the whole Disney family and the whole world when Walt passed away the next morning. He was pronounced dead at 9:35 a.m. on December the 15th, 1966, having just celebrated his 65th birthday 2 weeks earlier. The official cause of death was acute circulatory collapse. His heart simply just stopped beating.
Contrary to urban legend, he was not cryogenically frozen. He was cremated and his ashes were interred in the Disney Family Garden in the Court of Freedom section of Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California.
It was truly unthinkable. Walt Disney was dead. Roy, who had always been so supportive to Walt, was looking for and helping him. He had lost his reason for living. After an hour or so, Walt's foot was sticking out from under the blanket. Roy was by his deathbed and gently rubbing Walt's foot, and he said, "Well, kid, it looks like it's the end of the road." Roy was still his older brother to the very end.
Roy Disney carried out the Florida project, insisting the name becomes Walt Disney World in honour of his brother. Roy O. Disney died only 3 months after that resort's opening in 1971, so he lived just long enough to see his brother's last dream carried out.
Isn't it really lovely?
That's very sweet.
Isn't it? When the second phase of the Walt Disney World theme park was built, Epcot was translated by Walt Disney's successors into the Epcot theme park, which opened in 1982. The Epcot park that currently exists is essentially a living World's Fair. This is a far cry from the actual functional city that Disney had envisaged. However, the Celebration, Florida town built by the Walt Disney Company adjacent to Walt Disney World harkens back to the Epcot vision that Walt would have wanted.
I wonder how he would have felt about that, because that was the one thing that he really wanted to do. Like, he wanted all the rest, but he really wanted that, and then they didn't do it. They just turned it into another theme park.
Well, I guess without him, it was hard to have the vision.
True.
But they did open a... it's called Celebration, and it's basically a community. There's houses, there's shops, that's where hotels are, and it's called Celebration, but it's basically a city.
Okay.
So they did do it, and it's just opposite. And if you go to Epcot, there is places where they grow all their own food, and they're growing different things, and there's a massive science block. So they are developing things.
Just
and
maybe
creating
not in the way
things
he originally envisaged.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the man. That was his life. So let's have a look at his legacy.
Yeah.
And what a legacy it is.
Yep.
Today, Walt Disney's Animation, Motion Picture Studios and theme park have developed into a multi-billion-dollar television, motion picture, holiday destination, a media corporation that carries his name. And let's face it, you think Disney, you can automatically think of the man's signature.
Mm-hmm.
You know that is his writing. That was his handwriting. That was his signature. The Walt Disney Company today owns, amongst other assets, 4 vacation resorts, 9 theme parks, 2 water parks, 32 hotels, 8 motion picture studios, 6 record labels, 11 cable television networks, and 1 terrestrial television network. Because, you've got to go old school with the analogue television too.
Yeah. Disney almost owns everything nowadays.
Pretty much.
Because they also have a streaming service. I forgot about Disney Plus.
Yes, they now have a streaming service as well.
Yep.
All that's missing is official Walt Disney radio station.
No.
They have that too.
They have that too.
Okay, cool. Cool, I should know.
Today, what was known as just the Florida Project is now the largest and most popular private-run tourist destination on the planet. But Walt Disney's spirit and shine is still there. From the Partners statue at the Magic Kingdom to the Tree of Life at Animal Kingdom, Walt Disney is still remembered and loved by guests, theme park characters and cast members alike, and his vision is still continued. His fascination with mass transportation lives in the Walt Disney World monorail, which runs through 2 theme parks and 4 hotels, and his dreams of the future live on at Epcot in ahead of their time attractions and technological breakthroughs. His Skyway, long since closed, is now reborn as the Disney Skyliner gondola system.
If you can hear a little noise in the background, it's Emma's journals.
Yeah, they've decided to start drinking. Sid!
Yeah, drinking water, I would
yeah.
Disneyland has developed from a cramped theme park into an open resort of 2 theme parks, 3 hotels, and a large shopping complex. Walt Disney World is a popular destination for vacations by tourists worldwide, and Tokyo Disneyland is the most visited theme park in the world. Its sister park, Tokyo Disney Sea, is the second. In September 2005, the Walt Disney Company opened Hong Kong Disneyland Resort in China, with another Chinese theme park following, Shanghai Disneyland.
Yep. And in 1992, Disneyland Paris.
Yeah.
That's
the only one
I want to go to all 6. I've been to 3. I've been to Anaheim, Disney World, and Paris, and I want to go to Shanghai, Tokyo, and Hong Kong.
To be fair, I never financially got the chance as a child to go to Disneyland. Our choices were always Disney or Haven, and financially we ended up going to Haven. Somehow Tony the Tiger, as fantastic as he is He's not quite Mickey Mouse. But yeah, I ended up going with you and Ben back in 2014.
14, yeah.
2014.
It was.
Yeah, we went to Disneyland Paris, and I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be fun, but I'm probably a bit too old for this. No. We sat there, it was brilliant, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And then we sat there and we watched one of the parades, and I got high-fived by one of the Toy Story soldiers, and I nearly cried.
I tried to explain to you the magic of Disney, hadn't I?
Yeah.
I was lucky enough, the first time I went to Disneyland Paris was in 1994, and it was just before my little sister was born. I was 5, and my parents took me as you're not going to be an only child anymore. We're going to go have one final holiday, baby moon. And that's the first time I went to Disneyland Paris. I then went a couple more times with my dance schools. And then in 2000 was the first time we went to Florida. Mm-hmm. And we've been a few times. I've been 4 more times to Florida. And I went to Anaheim in 2012 with my family I lived with in Canada.
We seem to have this thing though where you'll tell me, it's like, oh yeah, you'll feel this, or you've got to understand this, and I'm like, no, I won't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, I do.
And I was like, Harry, you do understand. I was like, when you turn down Main Street and you see the castle, you see Sleeping Beauty's castle, it's just, there are no words.
We went for Halloween, and the park is open on Halloween night until 1 o'clock in the morning, and we all dressed up. And your husband Ben was a devil.
Yeah.
You were Merida.
I was Merida.
What was Nat?
She was a zombie Minnie Mouse.
Oh yeah, and I was a witch. And I had this cool cloak that just flowed out behind me. And one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life was walking down Main Street at midnight with the wind blowing and my cloak just billowing out behind me, being a witch in Disneyland. I'm like, yes. Life goal achieved. Life goal I didn't even know I had.
Right. That's the thing. Disney just makes you happy.
Yeah.
It really is the happiest place on earth.
It is. It is.
On the 5th of May 2005, the Walt Disney Company opened the happiest homecoming on earth celebration in front of Walt's Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland in Anaheim, celebrating 50 years of the world's most famous theme park. Walt Disney parks and resorts are renowned all over the world for their attention to detail, hygiene and standards, all set by Walt Disney at Disneyland.
And there's lots of little things like...
Yeah, tiny little things.
Little things that, I mean, you've told me, and because I have a disability, so we had a fast pass because I can't stand for long times. However, we did get to see some of the queue, and you've always told me that part of the ride is the queue. Yeah,
your ride starts when you join the queue.
Yeah, because of all the little details and all the great little bits.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that they've got all these little things like none of the cast, and they're called cast instead of employees. Yep. None of them will point, they will gesture with an open hand. They pick up litter immediately. It is spotless there.
Yeah, Disney actually did loads of research before opening Anaheim about how long the average person will hold a piece of rubbish before dropping it on the floor if they don't see a bin. And it turned out to be something like 50 steps. So every 50 steps in Walt Disney World is a bin.
I will actually hold that piece until I find a bin, and if I can't find a bin, I'll put it in my pocket until I find a bin.
In Walt Disney World, I think it's every 50 steps, maybe more, maybe less, but it's not many. But there is a bin every certain amount of steps, so there's always somewhere to put your rubbish. And they don't sell chewing gum anywhere in any Disney parks because people spit it out and put it on the floor. So you cannot buy chewing gum in Disney parks.
And I know that they've got I don't know if it's tunnels or just back routes and everything.
Underneath.
So that people can get from one part of the park to another, and they know at all times where each of the characters are in the park, so that you don't get 2 characters at the same time in the park, do you?
Nope. It's. I could talk forever about Disney World, Disneyland. Yeah.
Traditional hand-drawn... Nope. Yeah, sorry. I thought I was getting ahead of myself. I wasn't. I was spot on.
It's because we got into a Disney euphoria.
We did. So, traditional hand-drawn animation, with which Walt Disney started his company, was, for a time, no longer produced at the Walt Disney Animation Studios. After a stream of financially unsuccessful traditionally animated features in the early 2000s, the 2 satellite studios in Paris and Orlando were closed, and the main studio in Burbank was converted into a computer animation production facility. In 2004, Disney released what was announced as their final traditionally animated feature film, Home on the Range. However, since the 2006 acquisition of Pixar and the resulting rise of John Lasseter to Chief Creative Officer, that position has changed, and the largely successful 2009 film, The Princess and the Frog, has marked Disney's return to traditional hand-drawn animation. I love that film. It's not my favourite, but I absolutely love the soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Dr. Facilier's... The villains always get the best songs. But Dr. Facilier's song is just...
There's some very underrated Disney soundtracks.
Yes.
Hercules.
Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's just an underrated movie altogether.
Yeah.
And The Black Cauldron.
Yes.
I love The Black Cauldron. It's very, very dark.
Yeah.
Very dark.
As you stated before,
Yes.
Disney did devote a substantial amount of time in his later years to funding the California Institute of the Arts, or Cal Arts. This was formed in 1961 through a merger of the Los Angeles Conservatory of Music and the Cunard, if that's...
I think Chouinard? Yeah.
Cunard Art Institute, which had helped in the training of the animation staff during the 1930s.
Ah, so he's giving back to what's helped him. Oh.
When he died, 1/4 of his estate went towards Cal Arts, which helped greatly with building its campus. Walt also donated 38 acres, or 154,000 metres squared, of the Golden Oaks Ranch in Valencia for the school to be built on. Cal Arts moved onto the Valencia campus in 1971.
Lillian Disney devoted a lot of her time after Walt died to pursuing Cal Arts and organised hundreds of fundraising events for the university in her late husband's honour, as well as funding the Walt Disney Symphony Hall. After Lillian's passing, the legacy continued, with daughter Diane and husband Ron continuing the tradition. Cal Arts is today one of the largest independent universities in California, mostly because of the contributions of the Disney family.
So that's Walt Disney.
Yeah.
He was so much more than just... Yes, he was the dude who created Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
But if you think... Some people who have the upbringing that he had would kind of see that as their lot in life.
Yeah, they'd... Like his father did, basically. His father... He was put away and he did, he played the fiddle, he was told no. He then went into a life of hard labour. That's right. It's
I thought it was going over what we'd already done.
No. It's at the end. Don't worry. So he went into a life of hard labour and troubled times, basically, and I think a lot of emotional bitterness. And I think he then pushed that onto his children.
Yeah.
And thank you. And he could have done that. He could have done what his father did.
Yeah, but instead
he didn't. He turned it into something.
Yeah,
good,
instead of
wonderful.
Instead of not loving his children, he built Disneyland for his children, basically, because he wanted somewhere where children and parents can go on rides together, can celebrate together, can have fun together.
And children of all ages. It doesn't matter how old you are. The second you step through those gates, you remember everything that Disney has been to you.
Yeah, Disney is... I don't know if there is anyone, let us know. But if you are, you probably aren't listening to this episode. If you haven't watched a Disney film, at least one shot, and can put childhood memories to it.
Yeah.
Like, it takes you back. And you see characters, you know that they're not real. Spoiler... Sorry if anyone's listening. I see Mickey Mouse. I get emotional.
Not a real mouse.
I made my husband stand on the deck of the Disney cruise ship with severe heat stroke to get a picture with Mickey Mouse dressed as a captain of a ship.
I mean, that's dedication.
Yep.
But that is also a real testament to how much of... How can I say this nicely? How much of a non-heat related person your husband is.
Oh no, we were in the Bahamas. It was 40 degrees and he didn't put sun cream on. It's his own damn fault.
It's his own damn fault, but your husband is also, and I include myself in this, and I'm aware that vitamin D is not my friend. Your husband is one of the whitest whites that ever did white. He is so pasty that you could lose him in a snowdrift.
Yep.
But yeah,
Disney just makes you happy, and you put one on and you just feel like it's a warm hug.
Yeah, and it's those moments where they do teach lessons. They have morals.
Yeah.
And it's just something that you can enjoy, and no matter how old you get, and I'm saying this as a kid who grew up in the 90s, and you as well, no matter how old I think we are, the second you put on Hakuna Matata from The Lion King,
Oh yeah.
that middle bit with the chorus break, you know for a fact everyone's going to be bobbing their head from one side to the other.
Yeah.
And I bet you the vast majority of people listening to this are going to know exactly what we mean.
Yeah, because we just started doing it.
We did. And you can, like, there's times driving down the road and we're like listening to the song, and at least one of us is bopping, the other one's driving. But you can tell if someone else did that in the car, you know what they're listening to.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
It's just what a legacy, and I'm so thankful that he didn't give up, especially even after bankruptcy. He must have got some shit from his dad, and he's like, you know what, you tried it didn't work, I told you so, now come and work on this farm.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He was like, no, I'm going to continue to do this.
There are so many times he could have jacked it in and said, you know what, I tried.
Yeah.
But he didn't, and I'm glad he didn't.
And as we said at the beginning, he wasn't a great man. We're not sitting here saying that he was 100% morally okay.
No.
That he didn't have beliefs that aren't good now, that are abhorrent, that...
By today's standards, he would have been sexist, racist,
homophobic,
anti-Semitic, homophobic. Yeah, and while saying he's a product of his times, it doesn't excuse it, it explains it.
Yeah, definitely. There's no excuses for it.
No.
But then in the same context, you can't take away what he did, what he'd given the world. Yeah.
You can look back at people and history, knowing what you know now and thinking what you think now. You cannot put that lens on them. Because they were different times, different people. And that's why we try to be objective.
We do.
We do.
So, that was Walt Disney. I've been wanting to do Walt Disney since we started this damn podcast.
You have. You've been very excited. And
3.5 years I've waited, Carrie.
I did.
I think I've done...
Sorry, wrong franchise.
I think I did well.
You did. So.
But now we're on to our regular segment, Ridiculous Death.
I thought I would keep it in theme with the legacies.
Okay.
So we're going from Walt Disney, a wholesome family legacy for the most part, to a more adult legacy. Okay. Jack Daniel's whiskey.
Cool, I love a JD.
Yeah.
JD and Coke was... That was a chocolate Santa.
Yeah, chocolate Santa just fell off.
JD was my drink at uni.
Jack Daniel's honey. I've not tried their apple one yet, but their honey one is nice.
Yeah.
And it's very, very, very dangerous when warm because you breathe it in and yes, there have been many drunk nights dancing in your kitchen to that, and I'm glad we never decided to record a podcast after one of those.
Yeah.
That would have been messy. So,
Jack Daniel.
I'm going to shatter your illusions a little bit. His name was not Jack.
Lies.
His name was actually Jasper Newton Daniel. Just everyone called him Jack. Because somehow Jasper Daniel just wouldn't seem to work.
I don't know, I like that.
Jasper Daniels, yeah. So he was born in January. We're not entirely sure of the date. Record keeping, wonderful. But it was in January 1849.
So you can see why the records might not be kept from them.
He died on the 9th of October 1911. And the official cause of death was blood poisoning due to a gangrenous wound. How he got that wound...
Mm-hmm.
He needed to open his safe. So, like, he'd gone on, the business had taken off, everything was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
He'd retired a little while before, but he still needed to get access into his safe.
Nice.
Couldn't remember the combination to save his life.
Unfortunately.
Tried it several times, didn't work. Tried it again, didn't work. Got incredibly annoyed, kicked his safe, stubbed his toe. The wound became gangrenous, he got blood poisoning and died.
He died from stubbing his toe?
Yes. Death by stubbed toe.
That must have hurt though. You know when you stub your toe on like a coffee table and you feel like you're going to die from the pain?
He did. It wasn't quick, it was eventual. He got gangrene and that got gradually worse. So it happened a while later. But the root cause of it was stubbing his toe.
Because he kicked a safe.
Because he got mad.
He's stupid.
So
sorry, Jasper. You're stupid.
As much as you may want to, when you get frustrated, you want to knock something off and go, don't kick a metal reinforced object.
I would say don't kick any object. Unless it's like a pillow.
Yeah, but then what's a pillow doing on the floor for you to kick?
Fair one.
Yeah. Practicality. Don't kick anything. Yeah, that should be our official stance. When you're annoyed, don't kick anything.
Yes. Put on a Disney song.
Yeah.
And sing it out, because you will know the words.
When you're annoyed, Hakuna Matata.
I like that. Let's end it with that.
Yeah.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We've got some Christmassy, festive-y...
Because it's nearly that time of year.
Yep. In 2 weeks, we have a Christmas episode.
We do indeed.
And 2 weeks after that, we have got her first annual...
Mr. T Awards.
Yes, and we're very excited. I don't know how that's going to go. We've not done it.
We're thinking up tea-related categories.
If you know any categories that we can do throughout history, we've got like a dark cup, a English breakfast cup, a weak cup, a strong cup.
An Earl Grey and a Lady Grey.
Yeah.
And a Queen Anne's breakfast tea for our favourite monarch.
Yeah.
We also have the, the defective tea bag of history.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll go for that. But if you can think of any more categories and make them tea related, then please let us know. I'm desperately trying to find a way to make Red Bush tea work. But that will not be an adult section, I don't think.
We could do the sexiest one on history.
We could do, or the world's worst STD.
Syphilis.
We're not laughing at syphilis, it's a horrible thing. But let's make an agreement now to not make syphilis a target of the Red Bush category. Somehow. This is descending.
Find us on all social medias.
If you want to now.
Yeah, we are at Cup of History Tea, and we'll leave you with Hakuna Matata.
It's a wonderful phrase.